Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. I've been long interested in the financial world and global economics, in finance, in credit, monetizing everything under the sun, and how things work. And I must say that I have come across a book that you really all need to read. It's called Crisis by Design, A Look Behind the Wizard's Curtain. It's also being made into a movie. The author is Bruce Wiseman, a former banker, a writer, and he's a wonderful man that has laid out the architecture and details of how, in fact, the economy was designed to fall apart. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to It's Rainmaking Time, a very tough subject to talk about, Bruce Wiseman. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Kim. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, many people have been complaining about the economy, blaming the subprime mortgages, different people in power, blaming the Fed, blaming the insurance industries, the people that do the ratings for insurance, blaming the stock market, blaming the banks. There's a lot of upset and pain, and people really don't understand the intricacy of the puzzle that you seem to unlock in your book, Crisis by Design. Talk to us about what made you write this.
Well, thanks. That's a good summary, and the answer to your question is kind of focused on or embraced in the title of the book, which is Crisis by Design, meaning, and sometimes it's a little hard for people to confront, but I think if they read the material in the book, they can see it, that this financial crisis actually was designed. The purpose of the financial crisis very specifically was to take down the United States and the United States dollar as the stable point in international finance and to replace them with what was referred to as a GMA, a Global Monetary Authority. And this gets to your question because in March of 2008, I read an article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, written by the then president of the New York Fed, calling for a GMA. Now, as you mentioned, I'm a former banker and have been in the world of finance and investment and credit and banking for many, many years. And I had never heard this term. But a global monetary authority is basically a financial dictator for the planet. And my alarm bells went off. I have been following the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank for many years. And when the president of the New York Fed comes out and calls for a global monetary authority, as I say, my antennas went up. I started researching and I started writing. As those of your listeners that follow such things would know, the president of the New York Fed in March of 2008 was Timothy Geithner, who is now the Secretary of the Treasury. And in fact, last April, Kim, April 2nd, at the G20 meeting in London, a global monetary authority was put in place.
Wait, did you say put in place?
Yes, put in place. Not much fanfare. A press release was put out, but the leaders of the G20 nations signed an agreement, a communique, which established an entity called the Financial Stability Board. Very Soviet-sounding name, Financial Stability Board, which is located in the Bank for International Settlements, which is in which is in Basel, Switzerland. This bank, which was Hitler's bank, I hasten to add, has its own territory in Switzerland. It is not subject to Swiss law. Its employees are immune from any kind of prosecution. They have their own police force on the property. It's almost like the Vatican in terms of, I don't like to position the Bank for International Settlements with the Vatican, but just from the sense of political autonomy, that bank is a universe unto itself, and it is the central banker's central bank. So central banks, the listeners are probably familiar with the Fed, the United States Federal Reserve Bank. That's our central bank. Virtually every industrialized country has a central bank, and they are all, interestingly, members of the Bank for International Settlements. So this new body that was established last April now essentially has command authority over all the central banks on the planet. And why that's important is because central banks create currency. So if you control the money, the monetary supply, you essentially control the country.
But don't you think that a lot of people have a perception that the IMF controls the currencies anyway? And so if they think the IMF controls the currencies, what would be an issue with the Financial Stability Board, for example?
Well, the IMF does affect currencies, but the IMF doesn't give direct orders to the central banks. And the International Monetary Fund and the Financial Stability Board are working very closely now. But the Financial Stability Board is actually the senior organization because, again, if you can dictate to the central banks, you're basically controlling the money supply. The IMF is onerous in other ways in that it goes in, helps create economic catastrophes, and then comes in kind of on a white horse after they or somebody that's connected to them causes these catastrophes, and says to the president or dictator or prime minister in some third world country, gee, you having a problem? Would 5 or 10 billion help? And the president goes, well, sure, and the IMF goes, sign here. And so these countries become indebted to the IMF. I have read these loan agreements. They would stand the hair up on the back of your neck. They provide control over education, agricultural policy, tax policy, reproductive policy.
Probably land rights.
Yes. So
minerals.
Yes. So these are not nice guys. These are international bankers that have been eating up the planet like some kind of Darth Vader Pac-Man. But to control the currencies on the planet, that job has been turned over to the Financial Stability Board. And when you read the authorities that have been given to the Financial Stability Board, again, just last April, again, not highly publicized, but this information is available, and it's in the book. You'll see what has happened because the subtitle of the book, "Crisis by Design: The Untold Story of the International Financial Coup," and this was a coup. This financial crisis was a setup, and it was a coup. And the authority for planetary finance now resides in Basel, Switzerland.
Didn't it always with the Bank for International Settlements, basically 1 and 2?
Well, these guys have not, been good guys. I mean, as I mentioned, this was Hitler's bank. They facilitated the transfer of Nazi gold during the Second World War. They have a very fascist pedigree.
Do all central banks have to be a member of the Bank for International Settlements?
I think if you're going to, I actually don't know the answer to that question in the sense that I don't know if it's mandated, but I think if you're going to, transfer funds between countries and so forth, the Bank for International Settlements facilitates that. I mean, the truth of the matter is that's something that's needed, so some organization has to do it. There are 55 members, Kim, 55 central banks that are members of the Bank for International Settlements, and these are, essentially the central banks of the industrialized nations in the world.
In your book, you talk about several important instruments that I think the public should have a frame of reference for what they are. One is the Community Reinvestment Act. The other one is the Glass-Steagall Act, and there's a couple of more. But can you explain those two?
Sure.
I read your book. I know what they are, but explain it to the public.
Yeah, the first article in the book, and the book is really a compendium of articles that I wrote after I was researching this financial crisis as it was occurring. And you can see how, among other things, Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Fed, suppressed interest rates down intentionally and pushed, along with others, the Community Reinvestment Act.